Shortly after Christmas, Game Informer released an interview with producer Julian Laferriere at Ubisoft Montreal that shares a lot of fascinating insights on the development of Valhalla, going in depth on topics like naval combat, designing the settlement, how the skill tree was made, and more. So we're going to dive into all of these, but if you want to check out the interview for yourselves from Joe Juba over on Game Informer, link in the description below. About halfway through this interview, Joe asks if there's any features that early on Ubi wanted to include but just cut it in the final game. He says that for the most part, they stuck to their pillars, but one thing that they thought might have worked really early on was naval combat. However, they found out that Vikings were not really doing naval combat. It wouldn't have been historically accurate, so they decided to make these more like vehicles. Now, this isn't new information if you've been following Valhalla since its reveal. From early on this year, we knew that ship combat would not return. However, I wanted to revisit this topic because it's been something that I think a lot of people have liked in the last several Assassin's Creed games, and it makes me wonder how different Valhalla might have been if it did have naval combat. For starters, I don't think that naval combat is as interesting unless there are enemy ships or enemy boats, and I just can't imagine Saxons riding around on boats on these, pretty small rivers. Like, it wouldn't have worked. And then the whole idea of raiding, the fantasy of what it feels like to roll up in your boat and start a raid, that would have to change, right? Because if you could just park your boat and volley fire arrows into a monastery, you'd get those done way too quickly. It's fun to imagine what naval combat would have been like, but yeah, so many things would have had to have changed in order to make it work. When asked what surprised him most about the reception for Valhalla, he said that he was surprised by how much players dig the world events because they play a lot with the tone. Sometimes they're like a joke, it's funny. There's a character with an axe in his head, it's silly because that would never be a main quest, but it was also a way for quest designers to incorporate ideas that didn't fit in other parts of the game. If you know anything about the way games are made, you know that they are iterative. That's just the nature of this medium. So I really have no problem with this explanation. I mean, going into Valhalla, I was happy to know that a lot of the opportunities on the map, the wealth, the mysteries, and the artifacts, they weren't going to suck me into these endless fetch quests and side quests like we're used to in these games. And I do still like the idea of these little 2 to 5 minute mysteries that offer small narrative pieces that, don't ask you to invest a whole lot of thought into. They're just fun, right? However, I have 2 issues with world events and how they're designed. For me, it's a volume and a tone issue. You can tell with the volume that this game was designed with breadth over depth in mind. Now, don't get me wrong, I said that I like the idea of these short mysteries, but there's just so many of them. The volume is insane that they all kind of blended together for me. And then there's the tone. So many of these strike that light, jokey tone that I personally just wasn't looking for out of Valhalla. I wanted that dark, gritty, almost depressing fantasy. That sounds insane, right? There are some of those world events in Valhalla, but there's too many of the opposite, like the very opposite. And I think you just lose the cohesion and the general feel of the game when you have these jokey ones, contrasting with the very serious ones. It's hard for me to not look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey and think, oh, there was a lot of that kind of humor and flavor in that game that feels like it seeped into Valhalla, which again is just not what I was personally looking for, although I do realize a lot of people prefer that kind of storytelling. When asked how Ubi decided to use the settlement as a hub, he said that Origins was a big feedback point because so many characters were not memorable because you would only see them once. They weren't relevant throughout your game. So they decided to create one location where you could see these people over and over again, and screen time was really the issue over having things like more impressive clothes or amazing resolution on their faces. This design goal for me completely paid off. Seeing more of these characters and not having them just disappear because you don't return to an area of the world is a great solution, and it makes a ton of sense for open world games. For me though, I have to disagree on, the impressive clothes and amazing resolution part. I did want characters to have better mocap and better appearances. I mean, they look good, generally speaking, but I think it's a combination of both. These are supposed to be humans, right? That's part of the connection that I make as the player with who I'm talking to. If you play through Valhalla, you'll notice that there's 1 or 2 cutscenes in every single arc that has amazing mocap for Eivor and the characters around them. I just wanted more of that. I also feel like this was a great step, but the execution could have been better, mainly because of the pacing of the narrative. Some very important story characters are just not in your settlement for large parts of the game. It had me wondering constantly, where is this person or where is that person? Oh, I have to play 3 more arcs in order for them to return or for them to actually have something to say. These are small things I would change, but I think just from a general design perspective, this was the perfect solution, and it makes perfect sense for Eivor as a Viking coming to, foreign lands to establish a base. When asked why they decided to cover the skill tree with fog, he said that it's pretty intimidating for players to see all of the skills at once. They wanted a feeling of discovery, but also they have an audience who isn't necessarily into hardcore RPGs. They wanted to cater to them. They went for flexibility, allowing you to respec at any time, but also giving you as many options as possible to play around with. Since Valhalla came out, I've been bouncing back and forth on how I feel about the skill tree. I really love the flexibility. I think that's my favorite part, but at the same time, it felt like my decisions didn't matter too much. And while it does give you flexibility to go in one direction or the other, we all know that by the end of the story, you're going to be close to max level, and those decisions just didn't have a ton of weight. It is about the journey and how you got there, but I can't say that every single time I leveled up and spent my 2 points that I felt the weight of those decisions, that increasing my melee damage by 2% really mattered that much in gameplay. This is not just a Valhalla issue, this is an RPG thing that I get hung up on all the time. Small incremental differences, I just don't really see the point of them. They don't make a big difference. What did work for me, however, was unlocking those main skills. The fact that I was working towards one specific ability that would change combat and give me more options, that was awesome. I love that. In terms of side content, Joe asked if the variety of Valhalla's side activities was a priority for the team. And he said yes, for Ubi, that was something they focused on when they pitched Valhalla. They know that players engage with games for many hours, and after 60 hours, they still want that variety to surprise people in terms of activities to minigames to puzzles. Every location should present something exciting, and it should feel new even after so many hours played. I think Valhalla absolutely achieves this pillar. It does have impressive variety, both in stories told, but also types of activities and what you stumble upon and end up finding in any given location. But like I touched on in the beginning of this video, it feels like it's bursting at the seams at times. It's hard for me to justify just how many of these things are in the game. But we know that Ubi has hit on the idea of keeping players playing their games for long after release. From the very beginning, when they pitched the game to Ubi, Valhalla's goal was to have breadth. They've effectively turned this franchise into a live service product that continues to get updates and delivers, more content through season passes. For so many people, this is the best case scenario for an open world game. They want it to be as big and broad as possible and get the most bang for your buck. For the most part, most games, that is just not the experience I look for. It's not the kind of gamer that I am. And that is absolutely okay. I think it's important for us to realize that not every game is made for everyone. And that is it for this video. I'm curious to know from you guys in the comments below, what do you think worked in terms of all of these topics and what didn't in Valhalla? Let me know what you think. If you haven't already and you enjoyed the video, remember to hit subscribe and also hit that bell to turn on live notifications so you don't miss my next video. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter. I'm at jayvee on YT, and Instagram, I'm jayvee.yt. Plus, if you want to chat more about Valhalla or other similar games, join our community Discord server. We're discord.gg/jayvee on YT. Links for everything I've mentioned are in the description below. Huge thanks to my YouTube members, my Ultra fans Dave, Grass, Deadwalker, Bill, Cullen, Cam, and Jacob. Super fans Kamal, Casey, Tipsy Sergey, and Tarl K. My fans John, Matthew, Spyro, JVO, Level 42, Tia, Joe, Allura, and Lil Man. And my supporters, Nos, Nightmare, Sung, V-Toxic, Taryn, Glenn, Adam, Blaze, Mr. Hollow, Quickness, Firkin, Abhishek, and Shug for supporting the channel. If you want to support me further, click the join button below this video. In exchange for your support, you'll unlock custom badges and emotes to use in streams and in chat. Check the link in the description for more information. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.
Hi, monk. No need to brag of your faith.
Have you recently tested your faith? Considered the holy path? It is a better way.